We've gone through the prologue. We've gone through the interface, so to speak. Now we are going to begin. The prologue is here. This is the promise, which explains both the Old Testament and the New Testament. We have an interface here of him calling to himself his people, his men and women. Not so much by name as some of the other apostles do. I mean, the other gospel writers do when they say, and he called to himself Peter and John, James and Thaddeus and Bartholomew and on and on and on. But he calls his men in terms of purpose again, or expected goals. That these men, regardless of who they are now, are not expected to stay there. They are expected to end up quite different when this is all said and done. Now, today we begin that first cycle that I told you about, which will have 4 aspects to it. And we will go through a number of these all the way down. The first thing, it begins with some kind of an attention grabber. Some kind of miracle generally. Then we will have not just the what, but we'll have the how and the reasoning here. The what happened. Oops, come on, Tom. Tell you what, my brain is on vacation. The what here, this is the miracle up here. Sorry, mixed up. The why, and then he's going to leave you with the question. What are you going to do with it? And this is something, it's both instructive in a didache sense, but it's also interactive or applicable after the assessment and then the evaluation, and then what are you going to do with it? Are you going to use this or not? I can tell you all about electricity, but if you choose not to use it and you want to keep burning candles, well, buy a lot of candles. So that's how Jesus is going to function. And we're going to go through this again and again and again. This is literally, I'm not doing well today at all. This is literally how the gospel itself moves along. This is the literary medium that John chose in his writing. All right, so each one of these becomes a lesson in itself that if you put them all together at the end will form a fabulous portrait of who Jesus is, but hopefully by that time a fabulous portrait of who you are as the reader or the hearer, and how the two of you should in fact join together. All right, first miracle. What is it? Well, everybody knows it. It's water to wine. Now, very interesting thing about this parable, because it takes on much more than just the seeming simple event that it is. And we'll talk about it in just a minute. Theologians and critics over the eons have wrestled with this as to whether it even happened or not. Theologians have wrestled with the deeper meaning of this simple or somewhat insignificant miracle. I mean, let's face it, it's not raising anybody from the dead. It's just making wine. Basically, everybody does that in their backyards and their garages. Now, on the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. Now, you got to remember, Jesus is up in his own neighborhood. Where else would he start? He's technically from Nazareth, which is right down the street from Galilee, from Cana. And he's up in his neighborhood, and he's invited to a wedding. Wedding feasts usually were anywhere from 3 to 7 days, depending on how wealthy you were. Guests would come, and they would make booths for themselves, little lean-tos, basically. This would be a stick. This would be kind of a tent or a canvas, and they would, sleep in there. And they would just be all over your front yard, if you want to call it that, or backyard, or whatever. And people would stay for the 3 or 7 days, and they would eat and drink and dance and get as crazy as they could possibly get. And this was a very common practice. It was up to the host to provide for these people food and drink of that nature. And this was the nature of the wedding. If you got invited, it was a very honored kind of thing to do, to be able to come to somebody's wedding, because they were going to spend basically a lot of money on you. Okay, to feed somebody and to house them and to keep them hammered for 3 days was a lot of money. To keep them hammered for 7 days, even more. So it was a big deal, great honor, and to not show up or to show up and then leave early or any of that would be an insult to the family. For the family to run out of stuff and be able to take care of you would be an insult to you and to the disgrace of the host family. So there's a problem there. You got to really make preparations and make sure this is a problem because these guys ran out of wine. I guess they invited Big Bubba and he came and drank it all. Now on the third day there was a wedding feast in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, and Jesus was also invited, and his disciples as well, to the wedding. Now the wine gave out, and when the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "Behold, they have no wine." And Jesus answered and said to her, "Woman, what have I to do with you? What have I to do with that? My hour is not yet come." It wasn't Jesus' wedding. He wasn't the host of this thing. He says, "Why are you bringing your problems to me?" Basically, my hour is not yet come. That we're questionable about. We'll look at it in a minute. So his mother instructed the servants, "Whatever he tells you, do it." Now there were close by 6 stone water pots set there for the Jewish customs of purifications. Each one contained 20 or 30 gallons each. And Jesus said to them, "Go and fill the water pots with water." And they filled them to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some out now and then take it to your head steward or head waiter." And they took it to him. Now when the head waiter tasted the water, which had now become wine, he did not know where it came from. This was obviously because he was in charge of all the food and drink and everything. And he's saying, "Where did this come from?" But the servants who had drawn the water knew, and the head waiter called then the bridegroom and said to him, "Usually men serve the good wine first, and after the men have drunk freely, then that which is poorer," or the crappy stuff, "and yet you have kept the good wine until now." Now this beginning of Jesus' signs he did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now after this he went down to Capernaum, and he and his mother and his brothers and his disciples, they stayed there a few days, which was right on down the street over on the Sea of Galilee was Capernaum. And the Passover of the Jews was at hand, so Jesus traveled and went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves and the money changers seated. And he made a scourge of cords and drove them all out of the temple with sheep and the oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers. He overturned the tables. You know all of this. And those who were selling the doves, he said, "Take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a house of merchandise or a house of commerce." His disciples remembered that what was written, "Zeal for thy house will consume me." And the Jews therefore answered and said to him, "What sign do you give us to show, seeing that you have done these things?" And Jesus answered them, saying, "Destroy this temple in 3 days, and I shall raise it up." And the Jews therefore said, "It took 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking not of the temple of the stone, but of his body. And then when therefore he was raised up from the dead, the disciples remembered that he had said this. They believed in the scripture and the word which Jesus had spoken. Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover during the feast, many believed in his name, beholding the signs which he was doing. But Jesus on his part entrusted himself to no one, for he knew all men, and because he did not need anyone to bear witness concerning man, for he himself knew what was in every man. Okay, immediately you're probably asking yourself, at least I hope you're asking yourself, "Tom, chronologically this doesn't make sense." You are correct. It doesn't. We have jumped from the water to wine, the first miracle, to the scourge or the cleansing of the temple, which was one of the last events he did. Remember, that was the triumphant entry, and he marched into the temple and all this stuff, and he saw the people and he scourged them and threw them out. And that was at the very end of his ministry, just before he got crucified. So right away you got to understand, John is not writing for a chronological recording or historical event. What he's writing for is what? A purpose, a greater purpose. Throughout John, and this is where it conflicts with many of the other Gospels, he is going to arrange, in the other Gospels they have event A, event B, event C, event D, event E, event F, in that order. John is going to write event A, event F, event E, event D, and he's going to write because he's writing according to the lesson he wants you to understand. So you must study it in this sense. Otherwise, it's just going to be so much rhetoric. You're going to miss the purpose of why the gospel was written in the first place. You must detail and break down the positioning of each one of John's events. So in this very first event, we see the water to wine. That is true. But then the next thing you know, he's cleansing the temple. That was one of the last things he did in the public ministry before he went to the upper room to get arrested and all that other stuff. Okay? Do y'all understand that? Now, we have to ask the interpretive question, why? Why? Well, let's start with the water to wine. He's at a wedding. He's a guest. His mother's a guest. His buds are a guest. They're all hanging out there. Jesus is put on the spot. His mother comes and says, maybe she was very good friends with these people, and said, Jesus, she had some kind of up and up wherewithal to where, if anybody could do anything, it would be him. So he came, mom came to her son with extraordinary abilities and made a simple request. Said, Jesus, they're out of wine. This is going to look horrible. Can you do anything? And Jesus answered, not my problem, man. Not my wedding. What have I got to do with any of this? My hour has not yet come. That's a question we're going to see 8 or 9 times in the course of this gospel. My hour has not yet come. Anybody here ever got any idea what that might mean?
He's going to do his thing later, and
well, there's definitely a hint, or at least an indication of something is not ready. But we're talking about a timeless God that we're later going to know before Abraham was, I am. So I got a feeling that the not ready part is not in reference to Jesus. Something else is not ready. Something else is not ready. What's not ready? Well, at this point, we don't know. We're not told. Only that Jesus responds to it. His mother says, whatever he tells you to do, just do it. Did Mary understand this? Probably not. Did the men standing there understand this? Probably not. Did Jesus understand that? We're told 4 times in this chapter that he knew men and he knew what was in their hearts and he knew everything there was to know about them. Even from Galilee or from Cana up to Jerusalem, the span of the country basically. So I'm thinking the not ready part wasn't Jesus. What's not ready? What's not ready?
man.
Probably the guys that are standing there going, So they fill the water pot. Now the amazing thing is, you got 6 water pots, which are, roughly 30 gallons apiece. Wow, that's a big pot. And to have 6 of them, this must have been a very large home, an estate, probably a very wealthy individual. To have 6 pots, these were all ritualistic containers for the purpose, that we are told, of purification. The Old Testament, purify, wash their feet, do this, do that, do this, wash your pot, wash them inside, out, wash them, let them dry for 3 days, wash them again, whatever. If you ever read Leviticus, you'll see all that nonsense. So everybody had a little water pot. Everybody had a washing pot. Any good self-righteous upstanding Jew had a little water pot, but 6 of them with 30 gallons apiece. That was a big place. That was a big estate. This was a big wedding. This boils down to about, gosh, I can't remember. I did the math a long time ago, but I think came up with either 789 or 978. I think it's 978. I got this number wrong. 978 bottles of wine according to today's measure. If you go to Publix and buy a bottle, 750 milliliters, whatever they call them. Anyway, if you go and buy a bottle of wine today at Publix, it'll come in a 750 milliliter. If you were to pour those into here, it would take you, you'd have to buy 978 bottles.
Oh my gosh.
That's a lot of wine. I mean, let's face it. That's a party and a half.
Even if buy one, get one free.
Even if buy one, get one free, that's going to cost you some money. However, even better is this was the Lafitte Rothschilds. It wasn't the Ripple. It wasn't the Boone's Farm. Jesus didn't bring the Arbor Mist or the Barefoot Bay. The steward tasted it and he says, usually you pour the good wine first. And yet now you've saved the best wine for last. Pay attention to that. Best wine for last.
I know who you're pointing to.
Just pay attention for a minute. And the best wine for last is found where? Oh, water. God. And everybody was going to be fed from this. Everybody's going to be fed from this. And suddenly, we leave this arena, the first event in the ministry of Jesus, and we find ourselves where? In Jerusalem at the temple, in the company of priests and scribes and Levites, and everybody else was there. And Jesus is doing what?
Beating people.
Well, yeah. He's cleansing the temple. But wait a minute. What were these pots used for? We're getting a little look into the future, are we not? Remember what the prologue tried to outline. Remember what the transition tried to outline. From the old to the new, from the old drudgery and the old ritualistic, unending cleansing of the water pot to the new wine, to be enjoyed, to refresh, to be devoured by everybody. Remembering that the not ready part was not on the part of Jesus. Dang, the Testaments are starting to open up here, aren't they? A little bit of symbolic gestures here. Otherwise, you just got two stupid random events that mean nothing. How are you reading it? Well, read it in terms of what's happening. But most importantly, ask yourself the interpretive question, why would John align the first and the last events? The beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. Oh, gee, Tom, you sound like you're talking about God. Maybe. Well, why are you talking about God in the presence of these people who, by the way, don't know God? Must be a greater event here. Must be a greater purpose here. Must be something. You know, I write a devotional every week on my face page. I don't know if some of you all read that or not. But I wrote one just a couple of weeks ago called It Is Finished. Y'all remember that at all? It is finished. It's not just the worn out cry of a colorful career. It wasn't just the rhetoric of a politically correct stance. It was an acknowledgement of fact. that everything God intended to do to make himself known to us was completed. There would be no more. There would be no more. Everything he intended to do, last words he cried on the cross before he breathed his last was, "It is finished." Mission accomplished. Let me update it to the 21st century for you. Mission accomplished. Now, let's go back to John. Why would John put two random events together, the first and seemingly one of the last events? And why would he do it in the presence of his people? And why would he do this in the presence of his people after asking his mom, or his mom answering his mom, "The time's not yet ready"? Folks, he is tying together the entirety of the purpose of the Old Testament and the purpose of the New Testament. The Old Covenant and the New Covenant, that which was drudgery, ritualistic cleansing, day after day, sacrifice after sacrifice. It's unending. It never ends. 1,000 bulls, the blood of 1,000 lambs. It's unending. And as John said, "Behold the Lamb of God," the final sacrifice. That was in the transitionary. Behold the Lamb of God. He's come for a grander purpose with a specific goal in mind. Why would John start off with the first event made in the water pots of the Old Testament to the very best of the best in the old water pots to be distributed and refreshed and enjoyed by everybody in full acknowledgement of those in authority? Wow. Why did you wait to the end to bring out the good stuff? Oh, you have no idea. You have no idea. See, it's Jesus. He's not the one that's not ready. We are not ready. We're not ready to enjoy. So it would be like, how many here has never had a glass of wine? Y'all have? Oh, what a bunch of boozers. How many of you would consider yourself a mature palate in wine? A palate that, is sophisticated enough to determine varietal and vintage and that kind of stuff. How many of you just gets a bottle of Boone's Farm and makes that with the woman in the back of the pickup? Well, it would be like taking a bottle, truly a fine bottle like a Chateau Lafite Rothschild's 58, 59, and bringing it to a person who has never really drank wine, except maybe his grandmother made him drink some of that stuff she made out of apples and old tires, and said, "Enjoy this." And they would begin to drink it, and they'd go, what? Ew. Most people drinking a wine that fine, that dry, that perfect, they would go, ew. You got to grow into it. How many girls, usually girls, but guys as well, start off in the sweet wines. And then they try, and if they stick with it long enough, they develop a palate for the drier wines. The more mature wines, as they're called. And they are indeed more matured wines. But see, you can't just open one of those and drink it and go, wow, this is great. The light shone in the darkness. At first, the darkness didn't know what it was. Hey, here's a Lafite Rothschild's. By the way, that bottle's worth about $75,000. At first, people go, oh, looks like a bottle of Ripple to me. At first they didn't understand what was sitting before them, the treasure. And secondly, once they popped it and tasted it, they went, ooh! The light shone in the darkness. At first you didn't understand what it was. Later, when you did taste it, you didn't like it. You preferred the darkness. You preferred the Ripple, the stuff made out of apples and old tires, as opposed to the Lafite Rothschilds. Folks, that's what's happening here. Something is not ready. In purpose of goals, what's not ready? Chuck Bennett is not ready. Evelyn Bennett is not ready. Mary Pinger is not ready. Tom Chandler's not ready. When will it be ready? Well, the bottle of wine takes years and years and years and years and years and years, sometimes decades, to come to its fullness, to its fruition. So when am I going to be super Christian? Probably not this afternoon. Just like an athlete that Paul would explain later. You got to train every day for hours a day, all day, week after week, in the rain, in the snow, in the sun, in the heat. You train and you train and you train. When I was back in advertising a million years ago, I wrote a full we call it 4-color full page ad for Nike. I was working on a Nike account. And I got Carl Lewis. Remember him? He was an Olympic speed guy. And I got him, and I had a photographer come in, professional photographer, and we went out to a track, a high school track, to shoot the picture. And the guy laid down on the ground, he got down like this, and he had all his camera stuff shooting up, and he was laying on the ground, and Carl Lewis was lording over him like this. Well, Carl Lewis was in the running blocks, and he was down at his stance like this, looking front, face determined, sweat pouring down him, and we took that shot just like a second before the race would start, And the headline underneath it was, he trained his whole life for the next 9 seconds. He trained his whole life. That was my cut line underneath it. That was a headline over it. And then the cut line was Nike, just do it. And that was an ad. I sold a bazibas out of that thing. They loved it. He trained his whole life. In the snow, in the heat, in the rain, in the sun. He trained his whole life for the next 9 seconds at the Olympics. Who's not ready? We're not ready. And we need to be, because eventually right down here, the gun's going to be up and the race is going to start. We need to be ready. As Pilgrim's Progress said, tomorrow I enter the town of my Maker. I want to be ready. I want to be ready. Just a story about wine, water to wine. Everybody makes wine in their basement. Who cares? Just a story about Jesus getting a little bent out of shape in the temple. The temple that represented the very presence of God. The temple that was the ambassador to let the world know about God. The temple that nobody enjoyed anymore, even though it was supposed to be a reflection of God. And Jesus comes in and rips it to pieces and tears them up and says, get out, cursing and swearing like a sailor. Why would he do such a thing after this wonderful little event up here? Because he came to set straight that which is crooked and to make clean that which is soiled. To show us the new wine of the new covenant versus the corrupt mechanics of the old covenant. Corrupted not by God, by men. You preach the statutes of men as if they were the laws of God. This is a complaint Jesus will bring against the scribes in just a few chapters. One of the next lessons up here. You show partiality in the word. You take out only that which benefits you, makes you rich. And you preach the corrupt, sinful, evil precepts of men as if it were the law of God. Oh, Jesus was a sweetheart. He never got mad. Read Matthew chapter 23. He's yelling, he's screaming, he's cursing, and he's doing it all to the priests. Not to the poor people. Not to the godless or the heathen. He's yelling at the men of God. He's yelling at the best of the best. says, you blind guides, you are a son of hell. Now, if I tell you that, you might just say, well, I'm never going back to Chandler's church. He called me a son of hell. So what? I don't have that authority. But if the Son of God stands in front of you and says, Chuck, you're a son of hell, you might want to take attention to that. And when he looks at Mary and says, and you're because you're following him, you're twice the son of hell that he already is.
Oh, Lord, that's good.
Those are powerful words, and they are in this scripture. We've got to deal with that. But see, we don't read those. We certainly don't preach from those. We rarely teach those. In fact, it'd be better if we just took them out altogether. Some of your new versions have done just that. They've taken those offensive words. I'm offended. God's trying to oppress me. No, He's not. He's trying to get you to grow beyond your rooster mindset, your brainless ostrich, stick your head in the sand mindset, and to be the being He intended you to be, an eternal being of light. To which angel did Jesus ever say, you will be the Son of God? God never said that to any of the angels. He never said that to the cherubim or seraphim or any of His other beings. But He looked at Chuck Bennett, He looked at Pinger, He looked at Cucaracha, spoken a different language. But He said, you shall be the señorita of El Guapo. You shall be the Son of God. You shall be the daughter of God. Wow. I don't know if I can fulfill that position. No, you can't. But it starts today. You know, there's a movie at Christmas. I can't remember if it is like The Princess or Christmas or something like that. Hallmark Channel. I get all my sermons out of the Hallmark Channel. Anyway, this girl had to go to the Great Ball, and she didn't know anything about the Great Ball, and the Queen was hoping to embarrass her at the Great Ball. So she goes to the head butler, the head steward, and says, can you get me ready for the Great Ball? And he says, I don't think we have enough time. And she says, well, they're gone all day. We have all day. And he looks at her and says, it will take all year, if not a decade, to get you ready for the ball. Well, they try, and it's cute. It's a little romantic comedy. But the fact is, something is not ready. The time cannot be fulfilled yet. You know why? Like Paul said, I don't know what to do here. To die is a good thing because then I go on and be with Christ, or to live on for your sakes. For your sakes, so that you can know the completeness of the Lord I have come to know. Last part of His ministry, at the very end of His ministry. I don't know what to do. For me to live is Christ, but to die would be gain as well. If I live on, then it will be for your sakes, that I can prepare you for the kingdom of heaven. Something is not yet ready in the second chapter of John. What is it? In terms of purpose, in terms of goal, in terms of prophecy, in terms of promise, in terms of procedure, it's all pointing to us. And even if we want to be ready, we can't because it's corrupted. That must be cleansed as well. Why would John take the first and one of the seeming last events and put them together? What are you going to do with it now? God won't make you ready. God can make you ready, but He won't make you ready unless you want to make this journey. Something the pilgrim had to deal with early in Pilgrim's Progress. Do you want to make this journey? It's hard, it's long, it's arduous. You're going to hate it. Probably for the most part. But on the upside, if you make the journey, it can end well. It can end well. What are you going to do with it? All right, that's chapter 2, folks. It's only going to get worse from here. Oh, there's bells. Dinner's ready. It's only going to get worse from here. It's going to get more complex. You're going to have layer upon layer upon layer, and pretty soon you're going to see this whole thing. Literally, if I could Led Zeppelin a minute, it's a stairway to heaven. And you know what? Like I said to Carol in Italy, why does everything go up in this country? Remember that, Gary?
I think I said that.
So I've never seen a stair in Italy that goes down. Everything goes up. No matter where you are, what city, what village, whatever. 2 weeks we tromping around Italy walking up. But boy, the climb was worth it when we got to the Piazza of Michelangelo, wasn't it? Once in a lifetime event up there that night we were there. It happens like every 110 years or something like that. Where you have the sun, and it was perfect clear day, blue skies, not a cloud anywhere, which was great. And you're way up high, overlooking all of Tuscany. Not just Florence, but all of Tuscany. The Alps and everything's great. And they built this thing way up there. All the young people go up there to make out. And Gary and I were up there making out. No, we weren't. But we were up there with Carol, and we were looking, and to the west you see the bright orange ball. The sun got huge and orange, and it was just slipping behind the rolling hills, and the trees were silhouetted on them as gorgeous. Big old orange ball. And we were watching it, and when you're that close with that kind of horizon, you can actually see it moving. But right behind us the other way, big full moon. Coming up at the same time as one was going down. And when one was halfway, the other was halfway. It was perfect. Happens like once every 110 years, and we just happened to be there when it happened. We had no idea. We had no plans, but we wondered why 1 billion people were up there. And this is the reason. Oh, they're all dancing and drinking and having a good time watching this thing. And, you know, at the end of it, I think Gary and I just said, now, tell me there is no God. Couple of hunks of rock, you know, just moving around in space. But how cool was that? How cool was that? Once in a lifetime. Oh, gosh, let's get pastoral about it. Today, if you hear His voice, do not turn a deaf ear or reject it like your ancestors did in the wilderness, who had this opportunity to become ready, and they missed it. They let it slip away, and subsequently they all perished in the wilderness. Paul says this 23 times in his letters. Today, if you hear His voice, chapter 2 ends with a big old question. Mary, ping, ping, pinger, what are you going to do with it? Becky, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do? Are you going to go this way, or are you going to turn around and go back and get the wine that they make out of apples and old tires? You get better mileage with that, I understand. But there's the question. Chapter 2, lesson 1 is done. We have concluded. But wait, right down the street, something new is going to start. Something new is going to start. It's going to get more and more complex, more and more involved, because you're not children anymore. You are doing something that children don't do. I do this when I do marital counseling in my office. You are about to do something that children don't do, so it's time we start acting like adults. And they go, wow, I never thought of it that way. I just like the beads and the bells and the bangles and, you know, I'm in love. It's an amazing thing about this brain. Works 24/7, 365 days a year, from the moment you are born right up to the second you fall in love. Then it shuts down. And you become a complete and utter idiot to the rest of the world. And it remains that way for about 30, 40 years until you realize one day you wake up and go, what the hell? Where have I been? What are you going to do with this? Chapter 2. God's told you what He is. God's told you what He intends. God's starting you off and giving you the option. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? That's up to you. I can't make you go. I can't make people come to church. I can teach you about God. I can teach about the Scripture. I got a blooming PhD in this. But I can't make you come to church. Isn't that crazy? I can tell you the intricacies of eternity, but I can't make you come to church. I can't make you love God, even if you do come to church and I teach you this. I can't make you walk this walk. Oh, I'm the great mighty pastor. Not really. You, like Invictus, are the captain of your own soul. Which way will you set the course? Your hand is on your own tiller. Jesus can give you the favorable breeze, but the course you steer will be your own. So that, as Paul says, no man will have excuse. But Lord, I didn't know. Yes, you did. But Lord, I didn't have opportunity. Yes, you did. From the beginning of time to the end of time, my speech, my knowledge has poured forth to this world, and nothing has been hidden from its heat, its warmth, its presence. Even the blind man can't say, I didn't see. Yes, you did. All right, chapter 2. Make your decision. I'm leaving you with a big old honking question mark. What are you going to do with it?